If you can't get 51% of the vote, you should not be able to serve in office. Like, that's, to me, a simple thing. If you can't get a majority of the people that you represent to vote for you, you should not be serving.
All right, and we are live. Joshua, thank you for doing this. I appreciate you making the time. I know you are a busy man with a hard stop today.
No worries.
So thank you for finding the time to come on the Good of Twitter.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite, Troy. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Of course, I am as well. So the way I always start is, actually, this is how I start like conversations in real life too. Just so you know, it's like, hey, what's your story? Like,
Yeah.
Who are you? And I know that you're very involved in Twitter with being the marketing director of Students for Liberty.
Yeah.
I assume we'll go down that route. But who is Joshua Eakle? How did you get your start? What are your origins?
That's a big question. So I'll try to give you maybe the cliff notes, and then you tell me if we want to dig into anything. But so I live in Nashville, Tennessee. That's where I'm currently residing with my wife and my two sons. My background is, at least for the last 10 years, and the reason I think why I'm on the show is because I've been very heavily involved in what's called the libertarian or liberty movement in North America. I've been involved in that for about 10 years. That's what I do for work. That's what I do on the side, and it's a passion project of mine. I consider myself to be more of a liberal in the classical sense. So free markets, pro-democracy, limited government, freedom of speech, that can let people live their lives, but be responsible with my money, effectively, in a nutshell. But the origin story, what kind of brought me to this moment that I'm in now, is when I was 18 and I was coming out of high school, I was very interested in politics. I don't know why. I just was very drawn to it. And I remember watching the Republican Party primary about 11 years ago, almost 12 years ago now, and hearing from a guy named Representative Ron Paul on the stage, who was basically very combative with the Republican establishment at the time. And for a young 18-year-old impressionable Josh, took a lot of, he guided a lot of the things that I let's just put it this way. What he was saying resonated with me a lot at the time. And it kind of sent me down this rabbit hole of learning more about what is libertarianism, what is classical liberalism. And in the last 10 years, I went from kind of just being an activist early on to, in 2016, when Donald Trump got the Republican Party nomination, I left the Republican Party and decided I was going to jump full-time into Libertarian Party activism. So I went full-time into that in 2016. I became the chairman of the local county that I was in at the time, which is not a big achievement by any means. It's very easy to become a county chair in the Libertarian Party. But I grew that county affiliate to be the largest in the country. We had 80 people showing up at our monthly meetings, and it was very exciting time to be involved in third-party activism in 2016. And I took that and kind of leveraged that for a run to be the chairman of the Libertarian Party of Tennessee. And I was elected as the chairman of the party in 2019. And then I've been doing digital marketing and public communications pretty much my entire professional life. So alongside all my activism, I've been doing that in the B2B space for a while. But in 2021, I found out that Students for Liberty, which I was involved in Students for Liberty back in the early 2010s as a student volunteer for them, was looking for somebody to help with their global communication. So I applied for that position. I got that position. I've been doing that for about 2.5 years, and I run their global communications and public facing content. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about with Students for Liberty, but it's a very different organization than the Libertarian Party. So I think we'll probably talk about both of those things, because Students for Liberty is a 501c3 that focuses on the ideas, and it tries to basically help young people unleash their potential and become the leaders of tomorrow and make a positive impact in the world, not just through politics, but through business and through a bunch of other things. Whereas my activism work in the LP is very distinctly different from that. Two separate things. So hopefully that gives you some context, but that is I think that's the Cliff Notes version.
That's fantastic context. Yeah. That's fantastic context. Awesome. I got a lot to go off of there. Let's start with your chairman position and the activism stuff. So yeah, when you say you went into full-time activism in 2016, what all did that involve? So you started the... Yeah,
when I say full-time, that's what I did on the side. Because at the time I was still working a job, I had to pay my mortgage and all that. But that's what I got very passionate about it. So I was spending a lot of my free time doing that. For me, what that was doing was basically, it was communications and marketing for the Libertarian Party locally. So in the state of Tennessee, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the way ballot access laws work for minor parties, but one of the things that's very screwed up about our political system is we have both the Republicans and Democrats across the country often collude together to write laws that keep alternative parties off the ballot. And so in Tennessee, it's actually one of the worst states in the country. We have a supermajority of the Republican Party, and they have so much control over our legislature that they have a constitutional majority. They don't have to actually bring a single Democrat in to make very systemic, very massive sweeping changes to the way that our laws work. But since the 60s, if you want to run as a Republican or a Democrat for office to try to get into, say, the state house or governor or whatever, you have to get 25 signatures to get on the ballot. If you want to run as any other party, so whether that's Libertarian Party or Forward Party or Green Party or whatever, at least as it stands now, you have to get 39,000 signatures. So as a chairman of a minor party that was dealing with that kind of a massive uphill battle, a lot of the advocacy that I was doing was raising awareness on how broken the ballot access laws are in the state of Tennessee, and basically trying to organize people around different legislative reforms that could push the needle in the right direction towards a kind of a more free world. So we did a lot of activism on ending occupational licensing. We did a lot of activism on civil asset forfeiture, which is another thing that we could talk about later. And generally speaking, we try to run candidates for local, nonpartisan races where they didn't have to achieve that crazy signature threshold to get on the ballot. Because you can imagine, if I'm running against a Republican or a Democrat, they get on the ballot for 25 signatures. I have to spend weeks and months. That labor translates into dollars. So I'm spending the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get on the ballot. Whereas a Republican and the Democrat, they can spend that money on ads to run their campaign or to get more attention on their campaign. So it puts us at a massive disadvantage in any partisan race. And Tennessee is not the only state like that. That kind of story you'll hear play out across the country. It's a very screwed up system. But that's a lot of the activism that we did and a lot of the advocacy that we did when I was in that position for the 2 years that I was there. Very
cool. It's something that I'm 26. It's something that I feel my generation all says.
Yeah.
Is it's the illusion of choice. It's the uniparty. But when you break it down, myself and most can't really tell you exact details of that.
Like why and how it works, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the examples. So for one example, the 25 signatures versus 39,000.
Yeah.
That is insane. I didn't know that. And that's pretty wild. But it's
very cool. They're always doing what they can to knock you off the ballot. So they're always taking any opportunities they can. Like one of the reforms. Are you familiar with ranked choice voting?
Yep, so I actually am a big fan of the Forward Party, and I think that is like their number one big thing that they should just harp as much as they can is ranked choice voting. But yeah, please.
I agree. And I love ranked choice voting. If your audience isn't familiar with ranked choice voting, it's when you go into a ballot box right now, we have this plurality takes all system where if you get 33, if there's 3 candidates and somebody gets 34%, the other 2 get 32% or whatever, that person that gets 34% won, even though they didn't get a majority of the voting electorate. Whereas ranked choice voting basically requires you to get 51% of the vote. I know you know this, but your audience might not. And it allows it allows you to rank your choices when you go on the ballot. So you say, this is my first choice, but if this person doesn't get that 51%, I want this person as my second choice. And it basically instantly calculates through runoff systems everyone's first, second, and third choices until we find a candidate that has enough people that select them to get 51% of the vote to get elected. There are many people that could probably explain that a little bit better, but try to keep it concise. So ranked choice voting is one of the most powerful tools, I believe, that anyone in a minor party system has against the duopoly, because it allows people to not worry about that fear element. I mean, the 2-party system we have in the United States seems like a massive conspiracy, but in reality, it's a consequence of the way that our voting system works. If you have a plurality takes all system, you'll always have it kind of ingrain people into 2 major camps because they're so concerned that the other camp might win. So they always vote out of fear, and it's always a lesser evil situation. That's the way structurally a plurality takes all system operates in real life. So it's not it's conspiracy in the sense that Republicans and Democrats collude to make it worse. And they often work together in many states, like what I talked about with the ballot access laws, to make it very difficult to overcome that. But the fact that we have a 2-party system is more of a consequence of the way that our voting system operates.
It's the incentive structure, yeah.
Exactly. And so ranked choice voting fixes that problem. But another example is in the state of Tennessee, they just banned ranked choice voting statewide. So there were, for example, I think it was Memphis in 2008, passed a resolution at the local level that they were going to do all their city elections through ranked choice voting, which is an amazing change. It reduces partisanship. It makes people, candidates need to get consensus in a majority of their electorate. It makes negative campaigning very unlikely because you need to get that person to choose you as their second option. Otherwise, there's no path to victory. And so it was a great change that Memphis initiated this. But the Republican Party came and said, no, the party of limited government, by the way, the small government party came in and said, we're going to decide how Memphis runs their voting systems. And they got into a long multi-year legal battle. And eventually they just passed a law that banned it all the way across all the state. So you can't even do it as a city or a county. It's banned. And I don't think that there's any more example of a more obvious system where they're intentionally setting up the voting system to entrench their own power. And that is, again, not just unique to Tennessee. That's just the anecdote I can give you as somebody who's here locally watching what's happening on the ground. Yeah. That happens everywhere across the country.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I've already learned so much. We've been talking for 10 minutes. I've already learned a ton. Nice. But it's funny. It's funny you mentioned the party of limited government. So in my opinion, what's coming down the road, what I see from my conversations and what I'm just seeing happen is that there is going to be a third party. There are going to be, hopefully, down the road, maybe decades, but down the road, there'll be a lot of parties. And right now, what I am seeing is there's a lot of people like me who were, I would call myself a classic liberal, liberal back in the day, who were on the left, just voting wise. And that's just kind of of the two parties, one that we identified with most. And there's a lot of people like you who are on the right and lost that feeling the same way that you just saw what was happening with the right, the same way I saw what was happening with the left.
Yeah.
And I would also describe you as a classical liberal from what I've seen of your tweets and from this short conversation we've had so far.
For sure.
Because one of the things that I always go back to in these conversations, if I'm having a conversation like this, is like, yeah, Republicans aren't actually limited government. That's not what they are anymore. And the left isn't actually liberal anymore. Mm-hmm. That's just not what it is. And I see the Libertarian Party, I see the Forward Party, I see the Green Party, and all these different initiatives that are just catching so much momentum, at least individually. Hopefully together something can happen as the years go on. But it's just funny you mentioned that, because it's something that I feel like even 5-6 years ago, you would have been laughed at for saying. And now it's coming to fruition, where I just saw a stat the other day, 50% of Americans identify as independent.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. It's a good step. And it's a good way of seeing, okay, this structure isn't working. This whatever we're doing right now isn't working.
Well said. Yeah. I think that there are things to be excited about. I think for at least the Libertarian Party, they had a really good high watermark in 2016 where they achieved, I think it was like 3% of the vote, and there were a lot of membership. There was a lot of growth and momentum at that time. And since then, it's kind of fizzled out. So the thing is, I don't think success is a straight line up. It's up and down and up and down. And it's not just one party that needs to succeed. And one of the things I really appreciate about the Forward Party is their focus on fixing the structural issues so that anyone can succeed and anyone can challenge the incumbent. And we can kind of avoid this effectively one-party state that we have across the entire country. And you're right. I think you touched on something that is really important that for people to emphasize is that liberalism. So the classical liberalism, which sits at the foundation of the Enlightenment. It's basically, the ideology of Enlightenment thinkers and what led to our Constitution and what built our country to be the most successful country in the history of the world, were liberal values. Those things have been completely rejected by the left and the right. And the left and the right aren't much different than each other anymore. It's two extreme groups that want to use the government to kind of screw over the other side in one way, shape, or form. And they want to enrich themselves in the short term. So what can I get? I've got control over the purse strings. What can I get to help my team to keep me in power longer, or to pander to my voters? And the idea that we should protect the rights of everyone, even the people we disagree with, is something that is getting lost. And I see, like, on the left wants to censor speech that they disagree with, and on the right they want to censor speech they disagree with. The left wants to put people in jail that say live lifestyles. I'd take that back. The left is a little bit more flexible on the lifestyle stuff, whereas the right is a lot more against different lifestyles. But I think that is not not something that's going to stay the same. Status quo is not going to stay the same for a while. Long story short, a lot of people are happy with weaponizing the government against their opposition. And liberalism kind of rejects that notion and says we need to respect the rule of law and fight for everyone's rights. So I think you're right. I think we're moving up the upper, like we're moving in the right direction, but there will be a massive structural pivot that will have to happen. One of the major parties is going to have to die and someone else is going to take their place in order to achieve that. Or we're going to have some crazy candidate that comes in and completely rewrites what one of the major parties stands for. And that is possible. I mean, it happened in 2016 with Donald Trump. He completely destroyed the GOP and rebuilt it in a completely different set of values. So maybe that could happen again, but for a more liberal set of values. One of the things that really gets me excited is that a lot more people know what ranked choice voting is. And that's, again, go back to that. That's something I think is a very powerful change. If you can achieve that nationwide or achieve that even at the state level, that is a very powerful tool to eliminate the negative campaigning, the fear voting, and to kind of give minor parties a legitimate shot at challenging their incumbents.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's a travesty. If you can't get 51% of the vote, you should not be able to serve in office. Like, that's, to me, a simple thing. If you can't get a majority of the people that you represent to vote for you, you should not be serving. So
I agree.
We shouldn't be hijacked by a minority just because we shouldn't be. That shouldn't be the case. So
no, I agree completely. And it's something it would do is it would eliminate the extreme candidates. I think you could definitely. Right. Yeah. Some might not call Joe Biden an extreme candidate, but I think in 2016 you could definitely call Trump and Clinton extreme candidates for either side, and you eliminate that. There's a forced incentive to the middle, which is actually something that I really liked learning about when I was younger. Was the Clintons? They had this debate, like a public debate between the two of them. And I want to say Hillary it's all about structure. It's all about structure and incentives. And Bill Clinton was talking about how, no, you need good people. It's all about the people. And, obviously the answer is somewhere between in the middle of there.
Yeah, for sure.
But what I kind of found myself agreeing and head nodding with Hillary on, it's incentive structures. Not that I think she has done her part to put good ones in place, but I agree that it is incentive structures that we need. That's human beings are human beings. Our nature doesn't change. And that's one of the things I talk about in my episode with Rick Coast and Evolution Talks, but human nature doesn't change. We need good incentives. People are greedy. And this is something that I'll get frustrated with the left about when I talk to people who are socialist or communist, and I just say, man, you just got to read. Like, you just got to go back in time and read, because we learn about the Nazis, or we learn about whoever, but we should really be learning more about China's Revolutionary War. And there's a really good book called Born Red. It was about 14, 15-year-olds, true story about 14, 15-year-olds in a school during that time, during the communist China time.
Yeah.
And it's a lot like Lord of the Flies, but it's a true story. And it's like, we should have to learn about those. What do you say?
I said, I'll have to check that out. I'm not familiar.
It is really good. It's a good read. And it's so interesting, because the whole time I was reading it, I was thinking about Lord of the Flies. And but it's real life. It's in school, and the students take over. They separate into tribes. You just see the worst of human nature happen. And it's all due to these incentive structures. And that's something that I really appreciate about Forward Party. What I'm learning more about the Libertarian Party is that you're working to change those at the core level, at, I guess, the foundational level.
Yeah.
Versus what I've seen a lot, what my young mind would have thought of was like, we just need someone to run third party for the presidency and just try and, like, that's probably just not going to happen at the moment. We need to build a foundational level. And the more people I've talked to that are educated in this arena, that's what they say, and that's what they're doing. And you see it slowly. And like what happened in Memphis is going to be, like you said, it's not a straight line. It's going to go up and down, but it's very
forward.
Cool. So,
and forward's education on a lot of these issues and kind of getting people aware of just the incentive structure and how screwed up it is. That's huge. I mean, again, one of the things I was on one of the Forward podcasts. There, I know there's a couple in that space, but Holden, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Holden. I don't want to screw up his last name, but he does a lot of communications for Forward, and he has a show. We were talking about this. I actually think one thing that could be a valuable thing for Forward to do is run a candidate for national, but just have him talk about incentives, and knowing he's not going to win or she's not going to win, to talk about those values. So they may not end up doing that, because I think their strategy is that bottom up approach. But one of the things that definitely needs to happen is more people need to be aware of how screwed up the system is, and then we can rally people to fix it, at least one piece at a time at the local level. So
yeah, that makes sense. That's one of the things, like when Andrew Yang was on Bill Maher, I was excited for that. I think Bill Maher is a very reasonable, good voice for the country. And his critique of the Forward Party was, you don't have a position. You were UBI guy, which, whether you agree with it or not, it was a position.
Yeah.
And Andrew Ng kind of sat there, and I was yelling, like, dude, put me up there, put anyone else up there. Like, just talk about ranked choice voting. This is our thing, and we're trying to fix incentives. So
that is the biggest criticism I hear about Forward is like, who are you guys? What do you stand for? It feels like you guys are trying to avoid talking about, key issues. And I think they kind of do get caught in a trap because they don't want to offend half of the electorate by, say, taking a stance on something controversial like abortion. But you could be tactful about it and how you kind of to communicate about it. I think they're a really new party. Like, we're talking about a year old, right? So there's a lot ahead that I think they'll add a lot of value.
No, definitely. So because we have such a short amount of time now, I would love to go down that rabbit hole. But let's stay focused on you and your organization. So Students for Liberty, real quick.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that organization? And like I know you said they're teaching lessons and libertarian values to the future leaders.
Yeah. Students for Liberty is, again, one of the best, actually, I'm a little biased, but like the best libertarian org in the space. And Students for Liberty was founded by a handful of young students in 2008 that decided to put together a conference on libertarianism. They organized this together, as 4 or 5 of them. And they created this conference, and it was massive success, even though it was held during a blizzard and a snowstorm, but there was basically nothing like it at the time. And so they created this conference, and that kicked off what Students for Liberty was in 2008. That was over 15 years ago. And they started this conference, and they've held it every year. And so it's basically turned into something much bigger. It's turned into an entire group of young people around the world that care about classical liberal and libertarian values. And the way I like to describe Students for Liberty is it's an elite network of international leaders. That's really what it is at its core. It's people that have shared values and passions for liberalism, working together to help each other out across the country. And it's this huge network. We have students on every inhabited continent in over 100 countries. And basically the main value add that Students for Liberty offers is we provide leadership training and skills building and network and the tools that you need as a young person to kind of go out into the world and make an impact to push the needle towards freedom in one way, shape, or form. And our CEO, one of the things I really appreciate about him is he is not focused on just these quick hit political wins. Like, a lot of people look at the short term and they say, can I get somebody elected, or get this Republican who has some libertarian ideas elected and push the needle in that way? And that's long-term libertarianism. That's not the way that our leadership team looks at it. We look like we're building this elite network that's going to make generational changes, because the young people and the alumni that come out of our program go and start multi-million-dollar organizations or think tanks. Sometimes they run for office. Sometimes they do get involved in politics, but it's basically looking to change politics and push it towards liberty by putting out young people that are very skilled and give them the ability to go follow their passions and try to push for liberty in different ways. In every country in the world. So it's a really powerful concept. And it's again, I don't think there's any other equivalent organization like it. And just anecdotally, like from the way that our teams run, we're a very international team. So on my department, I think I have people across 8 time zones, people as far east as Sri Lanka and as far west as California, and people in Brazil and Europe. So it's like a really cool organization that has a very international perspective and cares about just liberalism. And that's the thread that ties all these young people together into this massive network. So that's kind of the elevator pitch, I'd say, about what Students for Liberty is. And what we're doing is different in every country, but it's been interesting to see that, because there have been some very some very powerful changes that have come out. Like, there was a major effort in Brazil I'm not sure if you're familiar with what a favela is. A favela is basically like a shack built in a place where the people there they don't own the land underneath their house. And so it creates these massive roving favelas, these kind of shacks, that are built that the government can come in and move you off your land at any time and force you to go move somewhere else. And it creates these slums. It's really tied to the fact that there's no such thing as access to your property, and you can't really defend it. So it creates these large slum-like situations. So, like, for example, our activists there have done work to ensure that that people have property rights, and it kind of fights the favela situation. In Africa, there have been dozens of NGOs started, and the liberal movement is basically the Students for Liberty movement in Africa, where many of our alumni have gone out and start organizations that kind of are the thought leaders of the classical liberal and liberal movement in Africa. And I mean, in Europe, we had young people bringing supplies and helping evacuate people from the front lines in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. And there's still many young people that are spending a lot of their time trying to provide aid and help the Ukrainians in their effort to fight for sovereignty. And that's ignoring, again, the alumni that we have serving in parliaments across the country or in legislative bodies. So the impact of SFL is international and it's generational. And it's the shameless plug is if you're interested in that and you're a young person, you can go to the website studentsforliberty.org and join the program. It is an exclusive program, so it's not one of those things that they'll just accept everyone into. They kind of look for somebody who has really good, strong leadership skills. But if you think you have what it takes, it's something I would encourage anyone to check out and look at, because it could be the difference between. It could be one of those things that really kickstarts your career and helps you meet a bunch of people you would never met and make a bunch of connections that can really help you move to the next step in your career or in your life. It's kind of how we're set up. Hopefully that answers your question, but that's
amazing. That's great. That's great. It was, I'm sold in the elevator pitch. That is an incredible organization. That's very cool. That's honestly amazing. I love the long-term vision. When you mentioned the CEO, the long-term vision of most CEOs can get trapped in a spot of these short-term wins. Yeah. And it really does sound like you understand you're planting a tree. The organization-wide, not just you, but organizationally wide, it sounds like you understand, hey, we're planting a tree. We're not going to be here when this tree is fully grown, which is a really difficult thing for us as human beings to do. So that's very, very cool. And stuff like that just also gives you hope for the future.
Yeah, and it's also got a unique right now in this world where we're looking for the quick instant win and quick instant satisfaction, the ability to really think about how can we build these, really invest in these young people so that they're going to go in for the next 80 years of their lives, push for liberty in the right direction. The impact of Students for Liberty and what it's going to do culturally, I think, is understated, because it will have those really long-term generational impacts, I think. And maybe you and I can come back in 50 years and you'll see what I mean. But I'm already seeing the result after 15 years. I mean, we're already seeing the results across many countries, specifically Brazil and Europe are really strong. And obviously we have many alumni in North America that are going out and doing some amazing things in the United States and in the United States political system and in business. But Brazil has been an incredible story of just the cultural impact that Students for Liberty alumni are having. It very well is shaping the future of that country in a really positive way. So, and Brazil's going to be Brazil is a very powerful, large country, but their story is not over by any means. They are growing like crazy, and the quality of life increasing. There's a lot to be said about those, especially countries like Brazil and countries in Africa. I have to say, not to go down a rabbit hole, but I want to say Ethiopia is going to have one of the countries with the largest populations in 50 years. The people don't think about that. Many of these countries in Africa are going to be as large as, if not larger than, the United States, and rival countries like India and China in population in about 20, 30 years. So, I
mean, I could have guessed Brazil. I would never have guessed Ethiopia. That's amazing. Wow, I know.
I'll have to pull up a graph. I think Ethiopia and Nigeria, Ethiopia specifically, not to get too far down the rabbit hole, but Ethiopia is modernizing really, really fast. A lot of people coming out of poverty. They're growing like crazy. But yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And I would love to dive down these different country rabbit holes if we had more time. But we are about 10 minutes left before your hard stop, a little bit less. Yeah. So very quickly, if you want to give an elevator pitch on the Classic Liberal Caucus.
Oh, yeah, sure. Happy to do it. So the Classical Liberal Caucus, this is where we start getting into a little bit of the political drama in the LP. So this might get a little inside baseball, but if you're interested in that, CLC is good. Okay, sweet. So the Libertarian Party has been founded since the 70s. And the Libertarian Party, when it was founded, there was this thing that happened called the Dallas Accords, which was effectively an agreement between the minarchist wing, the liberal wing of the party, and the anarchist wing of the party. And basically what it basically decided was we were going to make a set of decisions on how we talk about the party and how we talk about it in our platform. That's going to unify the anarchist and liberal wing, classical liberal wing, minarchist wing, so that they can fight together and share an umbrella, which was the Libertarian Party, to go out to make mainstream politics. Libertarian Party has been around for 50 plus years. And our story is not a straight line. It's up and down, up and down. 2016 was by far the best election we've ever had, at least as it pertains to vote totals. Membership growth numbers were crazy high at the time. Down ballot, we did very well. So that was a high watermark. Now, after 2016 and starting in around 2018, there was a a group, a PAC called the Mises PAC, the Mises Caucus that was founded. And they were a little bit more, I'd like to describe as part of the kind of adjacent to some of the populist influences you see on the right. Mm-hmm. So they had, I think, they were influenced by a lot of that. There were a lot of things about, like, say, Trumpism that I think that you saw within this movement. So there was a kind of a instinct to be a little anti-immigrant at times. I've seen a bit of that. There was an instinct to just kind of like cringe at the concept of tolerance and diversity. And I'll get into that in a minute. Just some odd trends, but long story short, they came in and they took over the party in 2022. And they worked for 4 or 5 years to kind of place delegates and take the party and bring it into their control. When that happened, a lot of the opposition to really a lot of the caucuses that existed at the time just kind of fizzled out because the chair that was elected basically said that she wanted to, purge the party of these old guard regime libertarians that don't align with their values. And it was very anarchist type ANCAP. That's really the best way I could describe it, is that kind of vein of libertarianism. And so a lot of people left. Our membership has dropped to historic lows. Our revenues dropped to historic lows. And in 2022, because I've been involved for about a decade. The founder of the Classic Liberal Caucus, Jonathan Casey, had said, hey, we need to create a banner to just organize these classical liberal leaning people and give them a place to call home when they're kind of dealing with this very combative and aggressive leadership from the state and the national level that's focused on kind of purging them. We want to organize them and give them a place to call home where they feel comfortable and show them how to get involved in the party and basically keep them from abandoning the party and kind of keep them engaged in some way. And don't ask me how this has happened, but we've become the largest caucus in the party with behind the current caucus that leads and runs the party in just a year. So we've gone from nothing to being basically the major opposition voice in the LP. And again, we're all focused on what would be traditional libertarian and classical liberal values, and we've been pushing for that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
it does. So actually, it does. That actually explained a lot to me, because when I look at the Libertarian Party, which if I had of the big three, because I would call it Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarian Party is the one that everyone else has heard of, I would identify with the Libertarian Party. And my assumption always was, well, at least with classic liberalism, and my assumption always was that's what everyone would go to. But then on Twitter, I'd see I might miss on the state, so I don't want to badmouth any state, but
that's okay.
It was the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, or whoever it may be.
It was probably New Hampshire.
It would say a lot of things it was Trumpism, and it was far at times far right, you could say.
Yeah.
And so that was a big turnoff for me. I think that was a big turnoff for a lot of people. I love Twitter. The good of Twitter is the podcast. I think it's an incredible place for open dialogue, for meeting people.
Agreed.
Obviously, there's a lot of the commentary is just upset and hurts people that are going to say a lot of things, but it's a place for open dialogue. I love that. Not that I love Tucker Carlson, but I love what he's doing. I wish Don Lemon would do it too, and just promote what this social media could become, and it's to its full potential. Because especially politically, that's really how myself and so many others are going to see the Libertarian Party, or whichever party it may be. I'm looking at this stuff I'm on Twitter a lot, but whatever it is, it could be Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever it may be. That's how we're going to see this. And it's the reason that, from an outsider's perspective, that your caucus has grown so fast, and it's going to continue to grow, in my opinion, is because you're the ones that are actually providing, this is what I think when I'm thinking libertarian. I'm thinking classic liberalism that I think a ton of Americans identify with, just don't have that place to go to. It's because they haven't heard of you. It's because they haven't heard of your caucus or the Forward Party or whoever it may be. I think it's going to catch steam very quickly. I mean, I think truly 2 or 3 presidential elections from now, it's going to be something that people know about in the mainstream. I really do think so. And it's due to your efforts and all of that.
I agree. There needs to be a massive liberal movement in North America to basically bring those ideas back to the forefront, because in the last 15 years, we've really lost sight of them. And that's one thing that I'm personally just very passionate about on the side. And I do that in all my work and my day job and on my side hobbies, is really just trying to raise awareness on liberal values, bringing those back to the forefront. My dream is that my children can be, grow up in a society that cares about those ideas again and are guided by those ideas again, because I think those ideas lead to prosperity, innovation, freedom, peace. And if we don't stand up and fight for them now when they're under threat and kind of show them how they're our pathway out of this mess, we may not have another opportunity again. So it's an important time, I think.
It is.
Speak out about that.
I agree. It is.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing. I know you have a hard stop about now.
I sent a message to my guy, told him I'd be 5 minutes late, so we're good. If we want to wrap it up, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. So I'll do quick fire here. How I end every episode. 2 questions. 1, do you have any books that you recommend? Paradigm shifters for you. Favorite books?
Yeah, I'd say, I don't know, Liberalism by Mises is a good book to check out if you haven't checked that out. That would be one that I think you would be worth reading. Honestly, just Ludwig von Mises would be generally an author I'd recommend reading if you're interested in learning more about the foundations of classical liberal thought. Human Action, for example, is a very interesting book if you want to kind of understand spontaneous order and kind of the way the human, really the things that underpin our economic system that people don't really think about. I'm trying to think about other books that I would recommend that I've read recently. I'd say to stick with that. I'm kind of drawing a blank beyond that, but I think in general, if you're trying to get a good foundation on classical liberal thought, Mises is probably the way to go.
All right. I'll definitely check it out. I haven't read either of those. I've built an incredible reading collection from these podcasts. Honestly, like the ability to talk to credible people is awesome, but also this reading list is very cool.
What was that book you recommended earlier?
Born Red.
Okay.
I will butcher the guy's name, but it's Born Red. It is about, I want to say, the early 50s. So I think the war ended in 49. So I want to say the early 50s, communist China.
Yeah.
Just one middle school. And it's middle school in terms of American, but it's a middle school, high school age school. It's very interesting. Just the way that the students organize themselves and how it breaks into factions. And it's a good case study on human nature. Very, very good book. But last one, and I'll let you go.
Yeah, sure.
In your opinion, what is the meaning of life?
That's a really good question. I personally am, I don't know. I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about that. The meaning of life, I think, is up to each individual to kind of define for themselves. I think that the most important thing that you can do as a person is to pursue things that you find to be worthwhile uses of your time and seek out the answer to that question on your own. Because I think the thing that is going to add meaning to my life may not be the thing that adds meaning to your life. So that's something I think that is a very subjective. For me, I find it, things that I value are the ability to kind of care for my family and keep them healthy and give them a better future than what I had. And so I think the meaning is kind of up to each individual to find in their own. That's kind of the journey of life itself, is to find that answer. I think. I don't know if that answers the question though.
No, I love it. It does. I love it. All right. I can let you go. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we could have gone for 3 more hours or so. But,
yeah, probably.
I feel like I really enjoyed back.
Maybe I can come back and talk about some other things more in depth. But
definitely, you have an open invite. Honestly, I'd love to talk to you 6 months to a year from now and just hear about the progress that your organizations have made, and hopefully by then I'll have a lot of political people on here. So I would love to talk to you. It's an open invite whenever you want to come on back.
Absolutely, brother. All right, man. Let's make it happen. Talk to you in 6 months.
I appreciate you. Talk to you soon.